that my dad has been a voice for secular democracy in Iran since the Shah. He was a dissident during that time. I was born just before the revolution, and just after the revolution, he'd spend a lot of time in jail. So he was gone for weeks at a time. He was one of the first people to warn about the new regime. He wrote and spoke out saying that they intended to establish a theocracy instead of the democracy that most Iranians wanted. One time he was gone for months, and my uncles had disappeared at that time too, and it became really dangerous in Tehran for everybody. The bombings had started, we didn't know where my dad was, and so we fled. When we got to the United States, my father eventually got out of prison, and he organized a trip to the U.S. to try to convince us to come back. Of course, we didn't come, but he decided to go back. He decided to stay. He had several opportunities since then to come out into the West and live in freedom, like so many of us have chosen to do. But he wanted to stay and fight for the freedom of our people. And he's always believed that Iran will return to democracy soon. In 2009, when he was arrested and in solitary confinement, I spoke at a rally, one of the 100 rallies that were happening around the world. People like you organized. And the next day it was broadcast on VOA and BBC, and the day after that he was released. So we know, as Amnesty International tells us, that when we put pressure on the regime by shining the light on the cases of specific prisoners like Nasrin, Majid, that the regime feels that pressure. They don't like to look bad, or maybe they don't know how bad they really look. And they don't like anyone shining the light on what they're doing. So these prisoners, when we do this, are treated better, and sometimes even released. He was held in Evin until September, when I organized a hunger strike, and during that hunger strike, he was released entirely from prison. What I was just asked to talk about was how he was released a few days ago. He was put in prison, as I said, a few days before the February 14th protests. Why? Because people like him aren't supposed to talk in Iran. So they like to come get them and silence them before any protests or demonstrations happen. So he was being held in solitary confinement, which is a form of torture, for a month. We wrote a letter to the United Nations, and we passed it around for signatures, and 150 Iranians, human rights activists, lawyers, former admirals, signed the letter. And before the United Nations even got it, even got a paper copy, he had been released. This shows that we can have an effect. Even if the UN doesn't vote tomorrow for a second time to send an investigator to Iran, what we're doing right now, letters we write with Amnesty, protests, organizing demonstrations, and putting things on the internet from wherever we are, will help those who are being silenced in our country. I know it works. So please, let's keep doing what we're doing, even if no one helps us. Thank you.